Welcome back. It's your man Wise, and today I have a great video to share with you all. We'll be reacting to Byron Donald's interview with Stephen A. Smith. Wow. The questions that Stephen A. asked, I must admit, they were smart. I'm glad he asked them, but the answers are even better. Byron Donald is a true patriot. He is a real brother representing the state of Florida, people that look like myself, and all Americans in the House of Representatives. Byron Donald is the real deal. I could see Byron Donald as president in the future. That's how much respect and admiration that I have for the brother Representative Byron Donald. Before we get into the video, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Drop me a comment down below. I appreciate all the love and support. And before we get into the video, we must have a word from our sponsor, Child Light Candles. Please support Child Light Candles today. Link in the description box below. Support a veteran-owned, family-owned, American-based organization. These candles are amazing. Buy 5 candles, keep 2. Mother's Day around the corner. Give 3 out as gifts. You have no idea what you're doing for this small business and for this family. Please support Child Light Candles, fragrances lit for the kingdom. Now let's get into the video.
Your words as an elected official in the year 2023, define your definition of a Republican/conservative and a Democrat/liberal or progressive. Give me your definition because I'd like to know.
Sure. Today, it's about, for a Republican conservative, number one, it's about controlling spending. Number two, it's about securing our border. Number three, it's about having a strong military. Those things are pretty consistent. Number four, it's about allowing parents to have purchasing power so that they can choose the academic environment for their kid. And number five, it's about just having secure cities and secure streets. And I would add number six is about having a financial system where everybody has an opportunity to borrow money, raise capital, start a small business, and not get caught up against crazy regulations that don't make any sense. I think conversely, for modern Democrats, number one, it's about climate change and their desire to get off of fossil fuels. Number two, they're not really concerned about budgets and government spending. I think right now they believe that they can spend whatever and it'll all be okay as long as the U.S. economy is going. Number three, and this is the one that's difficult for them because they either want to have no military at all or they want to be engaged in military conflict all over the world. That's a new phenomenon. I think that's more politically driven. Number four, they are totally fine with just one public education system that dominates where all children can go. And if you're in their view that that's the only way children can get educated, especially poor children in America, I think that's a fundamental difference between Democrats and Republicans right now.
As a Republican, what is wrong with the Republican Party right now in your estimation? Because this is the thing that drives me crazy. Nobody, we can be brothers. We can love one another. We can hang with one another 24/7. The same with us as sisters, family. There is no way in hell we agree with everything. Yet you see liberals voting in lockstep with one another and Republicans doing the same. And to me, that's not a realistic way of going about governing. Nothing's going to get done for the betterment of the country if we have that kind of attitude. So I ask you, because it's your party, give me something that's wrong with the party right now that needs to be corrected.
Oh, man, we're terrible at messaging. Not me. I mean, I'm actually pretty good at it, but the party's not good at it. Right. And I think what happens is their idea of getting the message out is talking to the Washington press corps or, you know, going on Fox or going on CNN. I mean, and I do it too, don't get me wrong, right. But it has to be more than that. It really is about engaging in communities. And that's a muscle memory that I'm trying to build in our party, get people to understand that if you want to be successful, yes, you have to go on the Stephen A. Smith show, or you have to go on the Breakfast Club, Or, I remember my first year in office, I went on Roland Martin's show.
He's my
Wasn't
buddy.
the best thing. We basically yelled at each other, but,
Oh.
it's okay. But you have to go into different environments and have the courage of your convictions. And I think I'll relate it to you like this way. A friend of mine, one of my good, close friends, was running for the clerk of the court in Hendry County, Florida. And so he's Black. I went out there to support him. And this is back in 2014, Stephen A. I'm just a regular guy. I'm trying to help my friend get elected. So I go out there and I'm cooking hot dogs at the local community center. And a Black lady comes up to me and she goes, you're a Republican too? And I said, yeah. And she goes, man, it's a pleasure to meet you. You guys never come out here. I just want to talk to one of you. And so we had a really good conversation. She's not going to agree with everything, and that's fine. But there are areas of agreement where I believe most Americans are, regardless of their demographics, regardless of their economics, because there's some tried and true, just basic principles that people believe in.
Wow. Byron Donald, absolutely right. If there is a knock on the Republican Party, it has to be messaging. They don't go into the communities that look like communities where I come from. It's rare that you see a Republican go into what would be considered hostile territory, because I almost think that they've decided the places that vote blue no matter who, we're not even going to try. They don't go into Baltimore City. They don't go into D.C. They don't go out there into Chicago and talk to the people. That's where I think the Republicans have fallen. They do not go out and speak to the people that typically vote for the opposing party. And in my opinion, that is something that needs to change. I think Donald Trump in 2020, I believe in the campaign leading up to 2016, he was willing to at least address the Black community. And I think that's something that had been different in comparison to some of the other candidates out there from back in the day. There's so many positives that could be shared, and so many positive policies that are going to help the Black community, the Latino community. But those people won't know it if you don't get out there and go to the places where they are. If you don't get out there and ingratiate yourself in the networks and platforms where you will find these people. Now, I don't know if the Breakfast Club would allow a Donald Trump to come on and be interviewed on a platform like that, but I would assume a Tim Scott could, and a plethora of other Republicans out there could get out there and get on these platforms and spread the message and share their message and what they believe. And these are the policies that we want to implement. They need to do better with that. If you want to attract Black and brown people, you need to go where they are and have conversations with those people. I would say the same thing when it comes to college campuses. We know that majority of college campuses are liberal. We know this. We need to see a lot of these politicians, instead of staying in those silos, in those echo chambers, go get out and go have conversations with people that disagree with you. And you're not necessarily going to change that one person's mind, but you may change someone else who is listening, who may be an independent or may just be in a situation where they don't know and they've only been told one thing. So I agree with the brother Byron Donald right there, messaging and being willing to put yourself in uncomfortable positions or put yourself on platforms that may seem adversary to you in the name of getting the word out about the party and the policies that the party would like to implement.
And I think the limitation of the Republican Party as it stands right now is the slight apprehension to engage in that. Because I will say it's a slight apprehension. It's not, they're not opposed to it. People aren't opposed to it, but there's an apprehension. It does exist.
When we think about Republicans, though, we think about it as a Black man. I will tell you this. You hear people like yourself and others take the position that once upon a time there was a need for affirmative action, but that time is over. Sit up there and of course, we want less government, but it's almost like the Republican side wants the eradication of government, where if it were not for government intervention, where would civil rights legislation have gone? Where would Voter Rights Act have gone, et cetera, et cetera? And so when you talk to me about it, I've never seen your interview with Roland Martin, and that's shame on me because I love my brother Roland Martin. He can be crazy at times, but he's highly intelligent, very knowledgeable, and I respect the hell out of him because he's real with his passion, even though I don't always agree with him, but I agree with him most of the time. And I definitely respect you a great deal as well. I guess I'm asking is that when we look at the Republican Party, you have people that feel like, hey, They talk about the Constitution. Well, the Constitution called us, 3/5 of a man, of a human being. When people allude to the Constitution, that kind of worries black folks. They're like, wait a minute, you ain't talking about us because you didn't even feel we were full-fledged human beings. You take those things into account, and you hear Republicans talking about the Constitution, and you hear them talking about the time where, taking us back, driving us back. You see these kind of things that people have alluded to when it comes to the Republican Party. Are you saying they're false, that they have a complete, they're completely oblivious to what the Republican Party is all about? You might not be that way, but we're talking about a party and how the party has appeared to conduct itself throughout the last several decades. To all of that, you say what?
Well, let's break down a couple of the examples.
Sure.
First, 3/5 clause in the Constitution. When the framers set it up, what actually happened was that the southern states, the slave states, they wanted to count every slave, but they didn't want the slaves to have a vote. They wanted to use the slaves for the purpose of apportionment, for having more seats in Congress. And so the northern states were like, no, we're not going to let you use them as a number for you to get more seats, but then they have no ability, no agency to actually vote and speak their mind. So when they formed the Constitution, the compromise was 3/5. That's what happened there. With Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act, it was the Republican Party. There's the reason why those acts passed. There were actually 5 civil rights acts that have been passed in the history of the country. Every one of them has been wholeheartedly supported by the Republican Party. The Democrat Party filibustered all 5 acts. And the only reason why the 64 Act even became law is because Lyndon Johnson got caught into a political pillar where the Democrats were actually losing ground amongst a lot of people in the country because of their stances with respect to historical support of Jim Crow, etc. I would say with where the party has been traditionally or contemporarily the last 30 years and talking about less government, it's because what I believe and what Republicans believe is that more government policy, more government regulation actually takes away from human freedom and human liberty. I'm going to give you a quick example.
Okay.
In our banking system right now, the Democrats passed when Barack Obama came in a bill called Dodd-Frank. It was supposed to regulate the banks and it was supposed to stop too big to fail. Well, what's happened since Dodd-Frank became law is that the big banks got massively bigger, and it's community banks that have been basically destroyed under the regulatory burden. If you're a black man in America trying to start a small business, where are you going to get a loan from?
Nowhere.
A community bank or from Wells Fargo?
Right.
A community bank will take more of a chance on you than Wells Fargo will.
Absolutely
And I used to work for Wells Fargo, so I could be critical.
And I've had accounts with Wells Fargo, so I know exactly what you're saying. You're absolutely right.
Yes. So to me, having bigger government with more rulemaking at the federal level takes away from a human being's ability to be able to determine their own fate and their own destiny with their innovation, their hard work, the gifts God gave them, etc. And that really does line up with conservative principles and where the Republican Party is with respect to limited government. And I'll add real quick.
Sure.
It's not that Republicans want no government. That is not true.
Okay.
What we want is government in the confines of Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. The government should do its job on the things that are its job, no more, no less. The rest should be left to the states and to the people.
Wow. Byron Donald, once again, breaks it all the way down. Now, I'm going to say this. I'm hoping that what Byron Donald shared, especially in reference to the 3/5 law or 3/5 rule, so forth and so on. I hope Stephen A. already knew this and he was just asking the question. I hope that is the case. But the 3/5 rule, Byron Donald, as he so eloquently broke down, it wasn't about looking at black people as 3/5. It was a compromise. That's what it was. Down south, they wanted to account every person as a voter, which basically would mean they would get more seats in the House of Representatives. The people up north said, you're not even allowing these people to have a say in their own lives. They're not going to get a say in the vote. We can't possibly allow you guys to count them, because if that was to happen, the people, the Southern Democrats, the South, they would have dominated the House of Representatives and they would have been able to do anything that they wanted to do, which could have potentially meant a block when it came to Emancipation Proclamation, a block to a whole host of other laws out there that could have been implemented, in the sense of down south, they loved slavery. They were about it. They could have codified that in the law to where, hey, this is just how it's always going to be. So not allowing them to have that type of power by coming up with this compromise of the 3/5, a lot of people will look at that and say, see, they didn't even look at you as human. That's not the case. They actually did look at you as human. And if you know your history and know anything about the abolitionists up north, those are the people that actually came down and fought to help free enslaved black people. It was the abolitionists of the North and the South. And majority of them, and if I would probably say all of them, were Republicans. When you start talking about smaller government, the larger the government is, the worse things are for the people. More of these rules and laws need to be kicked back to the states to vote on. We don't want a tyrannical government that controls every facet of an American citizen's life. Because at that point, what do we have the states for? Why would we need governors if that was the case? If we're just going to kick everything up to DC and allow them to, vote and tell us what we can and can't do, we at that point are no different than any other nation around the world. When it comes to the voter laws, when it comes to civil rights, the Republicans voted for every civil rights act that has been codified in the law en masse. If you go and look at the voter rolls, you'll see that it was over 80% of Republicans every time a civil rights bill came up to be voted on. They voted on it en masse at a clip of over 80% or more in some cases. It was Democrats that did not want these laws passed. It was Democrats. The people need to get their head out of the sand and really know the history of these parties. There's so many people out there that believe the lies and they haven't taken the time to go do their own research.
Government is the one determining what its job is. In other words, you go up on Capitol Hill, you implement laws and procedures that you have to follow. And what I'm saying is, if there were a bunch of Byron Donalds in there, I'm good. It's not a problem. Yeah. But the problem is there's a whole bunch of people that don't look like you, by the way, that are older than you, by the way, that have shown barely any interest, one would argue, in the upliftment of minority communities throughout this nation. And so when you take that into consideration, essentially, I'll use this analogy because you said you're a sports fan, and of course I believe you. When people ask me a question about Major League Baseball, Representative Donalds, right? They say, and I literally recently sat with the commissioner, Rob Manfred, and I said, this is the biggest reason why there's a paucity of African Americans involved in the sport more than ever before. It's at 6.2% last check. Once upon a time, like 1991, it's at 18%. It's dwindled significantly. Sure, you go into different parts of the world and you're getting athletes to come in to your sport. But here's the biggest reasons as it pertains to minorities, African Americans, that is, in this nation. I said, you're asking them to trust the system. You could be the biggest player coming out of high school. Still got to go to AA. Still got to go through AAA. Got to get called up. You got to trust that the coaches are going to coach you right. You got to travel and subject yourself to lesser means. And you got to pray that your talents get recognized before you get to the big leagues. And then after that, it's a rookie wage scale and all of this other stuff. So they're owning your rights for like the first 7 years. I said, you're asking young black folks to trust a system they will never trust. You're not asking them to do that in basketball. You're asking them to do that to a significantly lesser degree in football. And that's where the participation comes from. I'm using that analogy about politics to ask folks to trust the system or to trust those folks up on Capitol Hill is the biggest problem, wouldn't you say?
Oh, 100%. I'll tell you, and I'll use your analogy first. I'm in Congress and I don't trust this system. If anything, the way the federal government looks and operates is a lot like the Byzantine system from Major League Baseball. It simply is. And I think that if you had a conservative view on how the federal government should be allowed to operate, its rules and its tentacles, its reach, it would look a lot more like the NBA or the NFL, where it's much more about your ability to run, jump, throw, pass, catch, shoot, layup. If you have skills, but you're not the biggest jumper, but your skills are so dominant, that is recognized in the merit system of our economy. But when you put in so many rules that are there to quote unquote protect people and to help people and to save people, it actually does the opposite. It actually locks people out. It doesn't give them the room to run and to grow. And so then you're asking them to trust that some bureaucrat in some office in DC is going to see your individual situation and help you out. That's just, it's always been illogical to me. And so what I've always wanted is a federal government. It has its role, it does its thing, but the rules of the road are very clear. So it allows you and I to just operate on the field of play. Like right now in the country, you know, with cryptocurrencies, digital assets, we have a lot of young Black people, young white people engaged in that industry. You know what the biggest problem is right now, Stephen A?
What is that?
Is that the Democrats on Capitol Hill want to overregulate the industry before they even find out what it is. So how are they going to be able to put their couple of Bitcoins together or whatever they have and create a small business that could actually thrive when there's so many regulations in the system before they even start? That doesn't make any sense. Give the industry an ability to grow.
Wow. Byron Donald once again knocks the question out of the park. He's absolutely right. Democrats want to overregulate everything because they are the party about power. Think about all the laws that's been implemented during this current administration when it comes to the threshold and the tax reporting on CashApp and some of these other digital wire transfer applications that are out there now. Think about the regulations that they've put on Uber and, you know, all the gig work, Uber and DoorDash and all those folks. Think about that. Think about what's happening up in Minnesota right now, where they're trying to force a company to pay gig workers more money. And I believe it's Uber and I believe, you know, who else? Lyft. They're deciding that or making a determination if this thing actually passes that they're not going to be able to operate in a place like that. Democrats, they want to overregulate everything and they want to tax the wazoo out of everybody, which keeps you from having the ability to grow a business. They don't want that. Democrats don't want small business. They want big business that pays into their campaigns. Everybody else, you need to be poor and destitute. And that's the other thing. They lock you in to these systems, welfare and Section 8 and all this other type of stuff, and tell you it's all or nothing. There's no process to wean people off so they can eventually get off the government dole. It's all or nothing. Hey, if you have a husband, you can't have him either. So you got to get rid of him if you want anything to help, if you want any money. But these are the same people that are about the poor person's campaign. And they want to see poor people, you know, make it. But then they tell you it's all or nothing with them. There's no subsidy there. They're all about overregulation, overtaxing, and locking people in to poor and destitute situations based off of the policies that they love to implement. Because what we do know is that the Democrat has to have an underclass in order to thrive, because they have to tell you every 4 years, we're going to be the ones to save you and help you. When in all actuality, they're the ones here to hurt you.
Agree with that. Can't argue with that one bit. But I would say this to you. You know this from growing up in the streets of New York, going to an HBCU and doing all the things that you've done and traveling through the, you know, just experiencing the trials and tribulations that you have. Sometimes, first of all, people don't have a lot of time to know what you know. I don't know half the things you know. I'm a very, very busy man. I would like to believe I'm accomplished. I don't know what you know. I'm going to go up and read a lot tonight and over this weekend based off of this conversation. But you and I both know most of the constituency out there doesn't know the issues nearly as much as they should. So they rely on individuals, they rely on sound bites, they rely on what's perpetrated over the airwaves, et cetera, et cetera. So let's take, for example, a guy like Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. He's a Republican too. You've had your issues with him, particularly on the education. I mean, when you think about the teaching curriculum in Florida, what is this? Educators instructing middle schoolers that, quote, certain slave-developed skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. You spoke out against it. You're a father with 3 sons, if I remember correctly, according to my research, and you combated a guy like Ron DeSantis on that issue. What is it like for you to be associated with a governor who is a Republican, who would be supportive of something I imagine you found to be an egregious position for him to have.
Oh, I don't have a problem with it. It's like disagreeing with one of the players on your team about how you're going to run the play. We have the same goal. I think, Ron DeSantis and I, our goals are similar. But on this issue, I'm like, nah, bro, you're wrong. And let me explain why. And I think that it's healthy for that to happen internally in the party. What you don't want is for, a governor or somebody to say, this is what I'm doing. And everybody just puts their head in the sand, knowing that it's the wrong way to go. And I think that, so when you bring up that issue, it's actually really healthy, because what the scholars put out, could you say it's technically correct? Yes. But how does it sound? How does that appeal to people? What's going to be the response of people? Will your opponent, in this instance, I mean the Democrats, are they going to try to wield it and use it against you? The answer to that is also yes. So that's where I have a responsibility to come out and say, no, that doesn't make any sense. We should make a change to that. And I think that's healthy. And if you have a healthy party where you're allowed to have disagreement with people who are, I'll say we're kind of at the top of the elected side of the party, that makes it for a better party overall. I will be more concerned if I made a statement like that and the entire party came out against me. That's actually not what happened. A lot of people in the party were like, man, thank you for saying that, because I didn't agree with it, but I didn't know how to say it.
Right.
So when you said it, it actually gave me something to work from to be able to educate other people.
I feel you about that. I feel you on that, because you're talking about a bigger picture, and I get that. Yeah. The flip side to it, however, is this. If I'm with somebody that I'm aligned with, and they can disagree with me on the issue of slavery and how white, because when I actually went on Fox News, and I said this about Jesse Waters, who actually, I like his show and what have you. But I'm like, why are you even bringing that up? Why are you even defending it? Why are you even trying to explain what his intent was? It's slavery, bro. That is not something that we need to find a disagreement on, because you didn't go through that. We did as a people. And so for me, it's not just a disagreement. It's the actual issue that you were disagreeing on that made me look at Ron DeSantis differently. But I want to move on, because I know we're running out of time. And
I want to speak on that. And I remember when that incident happened, and it was, it made news, obviously went viral, and a whole lot of people were talking about it. And Byron Donald was absolutely right. You gave some ammunition to the left, because we know that they're going to clip it and they are going to soundbite it and they're going to spread it to the masses. Look, slaves benefited from Africans or black, people that were in bondage benefited from slavery by the skills that they obtained. I'm glad Byron Donald did mention the fact that it is true. To an extent, there's some truth there. They did benefit from the skills that they obtained during the time frame of being in bondage. Once the Emancipation Proclamation happened and free blacks, came about, there was a lot of those people that took those skills and utilized them to get their life started. There's a good amount. We also know that, if y'all recall the movie Glory, and I don't know how factually correct the movie Glory was, but there was a brother in the Union Army, and he was a good shot, if y'all recall. And they were asking him, like, how you shoot? He was like, oh, I was a hunter. During the time when, he was in bondage, he was a hunter, which he actually was able to use that skill set for good to go and fight for not only his freedom, but the freedom of his people. And I've read a multitude of books out there that spoke on enslaved people who had skills that sometimes on the weekends and other times during the week, they would get their work done, and then they were able to go and earn some extra money by providing whatever skill that they obtained, out into the community. And they were able to earn some extra cheese. And some people were able to earn so much money that they were able to purchase their freedom. So it's not a lie, but it's about optics. That's all I'm going to say. It's optics, and it's how you say things. And we also got to understand that, like I think they mentioned it earlier, and my apologies for hitting the daggone microphone. I'm a hand talker. You got to be careful what you say, because it's about sound bites and optics. And there's so many people that they won't actually go and read the article. They won't actually go and watch the press conference to get the full context. They're only going to listen to the clip from CNN or MSDNC. And if they said it, it's got to be true, and it's the gospel.
Really thank you for your time, and I'm really interested in talking to you about this. How the hell are you supporting Donald Trump at this point? At this point. I'm talking
Go
about.
ahead.
I'm talking about 4 counts. I'm talking about 4 charges, 91 counts. I mean, people are talking about you could be in prison, running the country from prison for crying out loud. Do I think that's gonna happen? Of course, I don't think that's gonna happen. But I'm just saying, how at this point could you possibly support Donald Trump?
First of all, I'll tell you right now, between him and Joe Biden, this isn't even a question. Joe Biden sucks. He's terrible at the job. And we do have to acknowledge that before COVID-19, despite all the circus and the phony investigations, the Russia collusion thing was phony. That's now come out to be proven. Despite all of the distractions in the circus, he actually did the job as president of the United States. Every demographic group was doing well under Donald Trump. Every demographic group was doing well. Our border was secure. There were no foreign wars that anybody was talking about that we were entangled in. Our country was booming. Energy prices were low. We were energy independent, something that every politician had said that they wanted to do. Donald Trump actually was able to make all that stuff happen. Now let's look at the actual charges. Do you mean to tell me that because a president of the United States had classified documents, who, by the way, former presidents still have their security clearance, they still get the daily presidential briefing, that now somehow this is a threat to national security? That is a joke, especially considering the fact that the only way the National Archives could even bring this charge, or excuse me, the FBI and the Department of Justice could bring this charge, is that the White House counsel, who works for Joe Biden, had to allow it. That's one. Two, what's going on in Georgia, I'm sorry, flat out wrong. Every candidate who runs is allowed to challenge election results. Every candidate. It's not some RICO charge. That's insane to me. And then when you take the other 2 charges, the one in New York, that one is just really, really stupid. And then the last one, this January 6th one.
Okay.
They have no, hold on, this is important, Stephen. I want to lay this out.
Please, go ahead.
They have nothing that proves that Donald Trump encouraged, organized, structured anything that happened with January 6th. This is weaponization of the Justice Department against a political rival, and it's flat out wrong. And here's my example for that.
Okay.
One of my colleagues, Steve Scalise, who was shot at the congressional baseball practice. The shooter said in his manifesto, the reason he went to shoot up the Republican baseball practice is because Bernie Sanders was saying that the Republicans wanted to take away health care, and he felt it was wrong. Are we bringing Bernie Sanders up on charges because Bernie Sanders was using his political speech and it led wrongfully for some knucklehead to come almost kill Steve Scalise? No, we don't do that. That's not the standard of justice. So just because they're using the justice system in a weaponized fashion doesn't take away Donald Trump's liberty to run for office or to be supportive of
Okay,
for
well,
office.
let me come back at you. This is just my personal opinion, my humble opinion.
Sure.
Nothing compared to you in terms of the knowledge, because you do this for a living. Let me say this to you. Number one, I think the charges in New York are bogus. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time, waste of government. No argument there. No argument there. Georgia, there, they got him on tape with those 11,700 votes he was seeking. Yeah, but I get it. I understand you. Now, the files at Mar-a-Lago. You had no business removing them from the White House. You saw the interview that he did with Brett Baer for Fox News, which I thought was epic. Okay, talking about you had shoes and socks and whatever the hell else he is in those boxes. Clearly that wasn't the case. There was files in there. And more importantly, all you had to do was give the Department of Justice what they were asking for. Remember, they came to him and asked him for it, and he had refused to give it back. According to the report, you would know more than me. I'm certainly only going by what I'm reading, okay? So so to me, that's problematic, because if there's anything that's potentially endangering national or jeopardizing national security, they shouldn't be in your bathroom or your bedroom at your spot at Mar-a-Lago. It should be contained. It should be in a secure location, because potential lives are at stake. Now let's get to the insurrection. I'm going to shock you here. I do think he incited. I do think he was irresponsible. I do not believe it was criminal. I do not believe that. I think it was highly inappropriate and wrong. There's no excuse for him to be, when they were trying to certify the election, there was no excuse for him to go out there and rally and tell them, we're going to go up to the U.S. Capitol. we've got to stop this, and, supporting people screaming about hang Mike Pence, because you wanted to get him not to verify or certify the votes, to make sure the transition of power took place peacefully, the peaceful transition of power. I do believe it was an irresponsible thing for him to do. But I don't believe it's criminal. The criminals are the ones that busted into the Capitol. The criminals are the ones that did those things. Not him saying he did use the word peacefully, because I'm no fan of I've known, and I'll tell you that story in a second.
He did say that.
He did use the word peacefully. He did say that. All right. They want to ignore that, but it's the truth. I got to say that. But it was irresponsible. And in closing, I'll say this. I believe the presidency is a statesmanship position. I don't believe that you can be somebody that is as divisive and dismissive of concerns that don't favor you and be the commander-in-chief of this nation. I think that leads to a divide. I think that's the kind of thing that could create civil war in this nation. And that is my concern. To that you say what?
Well, a couple things. First, I'll say with respect to the January 6th charges, yes, he said peacefully. We'll go to the Capitol. We'll protest peacefully. And in every one of his statements, he's always saying we'll protest, but we protest peacefully and we follow the law. The other thing I will add about January 6th, because of my time on the Oversight Committee, is Donald Trump authorized 10,000 National Guard troops on January 4. So if he was trying to have violence at the Capitol, why would he authorize National Guard troops 2 days before to be at the Capitol? And the only person who said no to the National Guard being at the Capitol was Nancy Pelosi, because Nancy Pelosi, being Speaker of the House at the time, is in charge of Capitol security. I know they don't report on this stuff, but that's the stuff that came out in the Oversight Committee. The second thing I'll say, going on what happened in Georgia, I've listened to that phone call. Everybody's listened to that phone call with him and Raffensperger. He's allowed to say, man, hey, I'm just looking for these votes. That doesn't mean there's a criminal conspiracy. It just simply doesn't. Now to the documents. And this is the important one.
Okay.
With the document situation, every former president has taken classified information with them when they leave the White House. Every single one. The National Archives Act gives them the Presidential Records Act, excuse me, let me make sure I say it right, gives every president a 5-year period to negotiate back and forth with NARA. It's always been an administrative process. With respect to them being, the picture of them being in the bathroom, I've been to Mar-a-Lago 10 times now. You just can't walk through Mar-a-Lago willy-nilly because Secret Service protection is on the ground securing the president's personal quarters at Mar-a-Lago. So when they show these pictures, that's because the FBI took that picture and then leaked that picture to the press. It wasn't that somebody put it on their Instagram. That's the way they would want it to seem, but that's not actually the case. So the president, under the Presidential Records Act, not just him, but every president has the ability to go back and forth with the National Archives about what material is in a former president's possession, and they do that. I truly believe what happened here is that you had some bureaucrat at the National Archives was basically like, oh, I saw something, let's go in there and get it. They couldn't do it on their own. And so you had to have the White House counsel's office sign off on it because the president, Joe Biden, had to basically revoke Donald Trump's presidential privileges in order to send in the FBI. That's the issue with the documents case.
Okay, so I only got a few minutes left. Let me get to this real quick. I need some quick answers from you.
Yeah, we'll go quick.
4 indictments, 91 counts. Why bother? I mean, if DeSantis was in office, if Ramaswamy was in office, if Nikki Haley was in office, if Chris Christie was in office, the list goes on. If you were there, according to how you sound, y'all all would probably vote pretty much identical, or you'd run the country pretty close to how he did it from a policy perspective. Why don't y'all look at it and go like this? Look, man, we appreciate what he's done as president. We liked him. But you know what? This is a bit too much. Let's move forward with somebody else and get rid of all of this noise. Why can't y'all do that?
Well, that's a great question. I think that there are some people who are there, but most of the party, in terms of the voters now, the Republican voters on the ground, they're not there. Second thing is that, as a Republican, it's all in vogue now to be a fighter and stand on principle and say no to the media and call them out when they're being ridiculous at a moment's notice.
Mm-hmm.
But before Donald Trump, no Republican was doing that. They would all turn tail and run if there was any political pressure or any media pressure whatsoever, because they were more concerned about poll numbers and actually doing the right thing for the country. So I think you have a lot of Republican voters who look at this and they say, when he was president, the country was in a significantly better place. They've been chasing him down for years, not just with the 4 cases. Go back to Russia collusion, the 2 impeachments and all that stuff. They've been going after Donald Trump since 2015. And the man is still here fighting these people. And in the mind of a lot of Republican voters, and I'll even say a lot of Americans, if this guy's willing to stand up to all of these people, he's got to be doing something right, because the people that were running the country before, they sucked at the job and they didn't know what they were doing. And the country was worse off as a result.
He's 77.
Yeah.
Biden's 81 going on 82. Nancy Pelosi just broke news talking about she's going to return to office. What is she, 88? I don't know how old she is, but it's in the 80s, okay? and Mitch McConnell, God bless him, not wishing anything harm. He froze not once or twice. Clearly something was wrong. I don't know what is. I know the doctor's reports came out and said he's okay, but we saw what we saw. As a 44-year-old congressman, I'm imagining you have aspirations. Some people have said governor of Florida in 2026. Others have said vice president down the line. How do you feel about the fact that these folks in their late 70s and 80s won't go home?
Well, I mean, look, for me, it's, are you mentally capable? That's number one.
Yeah.
Or
Not
do you
age.
have like a job in front of you?
Correct.
With Mitch, my view, it's time for Mitch to step down from Republican leadership. If he leaves the Senate, that's something for the Senate to decide. But to be the Republican leader, yeah, it's time. It's time for that to end. I mean, Joe Biden, let's just be perfectly honest. And this is not a political thing, because nobody wants to see anybody go through this. But he's not the same man he was 4 years ago or even 2 years ago.
I've said that.
And everybody can see it. Mm-hmm. It's clear as day. Nancy Pelosi's not going to be speaker anymore, so I don't get it. Donald Trump is running for president. And when I last talked to him a week ago, 2 weeks ago, mental capacity is still there. Energy level is still there. So as long as you have your faculties about you, I don't really think age is the thing. Mm-hmm. But if you're not in a leadership position anymore, but you're just hanging on for the sake of hanging on, it's time to go. It's time for a new one.
Wow. This circle back, and I wanted to let this play for a little bit because I know the video was long and I wanted to let it play before I actually ended this video and said what I wanted to say. Stephen A. was asking the Republican Party to do what the Democrat Party does. It wouldn't surprise me one bit when we get to the DNC that they remove Joe Biden and put candidate whoever. A lot of people say maybe Gavin Newsom. I don't know. But a lot of people seem to think that. They do. The people say they want Trump. Everywhere President Trump goes, the people tell you they want Trump. We want Trump. The voters. It has nothing to do with what the party says. It's about the voters. This past primary season, and I know we're still going here in the state that I live in. Our primary is next month. Not that it matters for the presidential election, but we have a host of other important, races that are going on right now. The people are saying, we want Trump. He was down in Georgia. Man, got a great daggone audience there. Was welcomed with open arms. You go to the rallies, you see the rallies around the country. He gets welcomed with open arms. He was up in New York, welcomed with open arms. It's the people. It's the voters. When you look at the percentages in the primaries over these past couple of months, the people say they want Trump. What we do know is before Trump got in office, 8 years of Obama, it was not good in this country. Unemployment rates were high. The list goes on. That Obamacare situation, it's been a disaster for most Americans. If you are a working class, middle class American, this Obamacare policy, it was awful. It's been terrible. Healthcare has gone up tremendously in comparison to what it was prior to Obamacare. That's a fact. When you look at when Trump was in office, man, jobs were plentiful, gas was low, The cost of goods were lower. Interest rates were lower. Money was cheap. Companies were expanding. Companies were hiring people at all-time numbers. Businesses were being started at greater numbers than we had seen in a very long time. There was a lot of positives that happened during the Trump administration, especially before the shutdowns. The American people, those of us that have lived it, those of us that lived the 8 years of Obama and prior to, those of us that has been here on this planet, walking in this country over the past 3 years, 3.5 years of this administration, there is a stark difference. And now liberal cities like New York are starting to see and starting to wake up. Liberal cities like Chicago, they're waking up and realizing, wait, these policies, we've been voting blue no matter who, but these policies are not good. And they've actually are a detriment to us and our communities. So it's the people. Now I know Stephen A makes $12.5 million a year, and I'm sure he's got some other, forms of income coming in. The things that the average American is dealing with doesn't bother him. But for those of us that are out here, those of us that have to get up every day and go grind, I told you guys about the brother that was working 3 jobs. He had a full-time job and 2 part-times, or maybe 2 full-times and 1 part-time, whatever. That brother, there is a host of people out there. It almost seems like everybody I know has a full-time job and a side hustle of some sort, or they're working as much overtime as they can possibly work on their main position, which is almost like having 2 jobs because they're working the weekends. There's a lot of people out there that are doing that. Home prices have gone up. Interest rates have gone up. Home purchases down. Wages have gone up, but the cost of living has gone up so much so to where it's almost like you didn't get a raise. Things are tough right now. There's a reason why people are flocking to Trump. There's a reason why people that said they would never vote for that guy in 20 are now saying we have to have him in office now. There's a reason behind it. And the reason is the policies of this current administration have been so bad. The people that we have in office right now, Stephen A said it, this is a statesman position. Really? If that is the case, the guy that's the face of our country right now can't put 2 sentences together coherently. The people that are representing us right now, President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, they're going to go down as the worst president-VP combo in history. I don't know if there is a administration worse than this one. Let me know what you guys think. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. Drop me a comment down below. I appreciate all the love and support. Keep God first in your life, America first, and I'm going to catch up with you all next time. Peace.